Everyone is screaming that debt is the enemy and you need to live like a monk to pay it off on YouTube, in the financial advice books, literally everywhere. And I know it's easy to jump on the bandwagon and say that all debt is bad. You need to sacrifice everything to get rid of it and you can't relax until you do so. But I can tell you that's straight up false. And how do I know this? Because over the past 5 years, I've run a multiple seven-figure business that has helped close to 1,000 Christian families and individuals decrease debt by over $4 million, increase savings by almost $3 million, and increase their investments by $3 million as well. We've had specific clients like my client Danielle, who paid off $15K in debt in less than a year without paying a single cent in interest. And so with someone who has a lot of skin in the game, not all debt strategies work. And in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly what does work to pay off debt fast in 2025. And the first step is one that is by far the most important, yet also the most overlooked. And it's the reason why 99% of people stay trapped in debt for forever, right? And so the issue here is that they don't understand that there is a difference between good debt and bad debt. Good debt is leveraging other people's money at no cost or a low cost to increase your value, your wealth, and your opportunities. Bad debt is buying things that you don't need with money that you don't have, with no plan on how to pay it off, with a high interest rate. And so to give you a couple of examples here, bad debt would be like not having enough money to pay your bills, having nothing in savings, and already having interest-bearing debt, and going to the mall and going on a shopping spree for things that you don't need, and that credit card that you're putting the money on having a 30% interest rate, and you paying the minimum monthly payment each month, or overspending and going on a vacation when a lot of the same stipulations are active, right? Just spending money on things that you don't need with no plan on how to pay it off at a high interest rate is usually good examples of bad debt. I'll give you some simplistic examples of good debt and maybe a more advanced example to kind of show you some proof of concept with it. So one simple example, let's just say that if you went and got a master's degree right now, you can make $30,000 more a year. Let's say that your master's degree cost you $90,000 in student loan debt. And after you pay the interest, we'll just make it easy numbers and say you're going to pay back $150, right? After 5 years, you would have made your money back, because 150 divided by 30,000, which is how much more money you're going to make a year now from having a master's degree, equals 5 years. Everything after that is now straight profit, right? And so that was leveraging other people's money at no cost or a low cost. And so other people's money, or OPM, would be like the bank's money to basically student loans. And the majority of student loans, depending on the lender and depending on the situation in the year, are usually a fairly good interest rate. They're definitely usually less than 10%, if not less than 7%. And I see a lot that are less than 5%. Right. And so that's leveraging somebody else's money at no cost or a low cost. And that type of interest rate is a low cost to increase your value, your opportunities, and your wealth. That's exactly what getting a master's degree did for this theoretical situation. Another opportunity to look at is a mortgage, right? Maybe in the short term, it makes sense to rent because you don't know where you want to live. You're saving up money for a down payment. Maybe you're thinking interest rates are going to come down, or maybe you're just in transition. Right. And so an argument can be made why it makes sense to, rent in the short term compared to purchase. Right. But buying a house cash, even if you had the opportunity to do so, I think a lot of times is foolish. And so backing up here just a little bit to like the renting side of things, yes, you can make an argument to rent in a short period of time or in the short term, but over the long haul, if you're going to need a roof over your head and you're going to pay for that roof over your head, you might as well be putting it towards something that is saving and making you money instead of something that is not, like rent. And so when you pay your rent, when you move out, the only thing you have to show for that rent is nothing. You just had a temporary roof over your head, right? But when you're paying a mortgage, right? Yes, there's an interest rate on it, but when you're paying a mortgage, you're increasing the equity on your home, which means the difference between what it's worth and how much you owe. And so when you're putting monthly payments towards your mortgage, right, you're increasing your equity, you're saving money, and you're growing it because the value of the house should ultimately grow over time as well. And so that's why I think, just from a comparison standpoint of renting and owning over the long term, if you're going to pay for a roof over your head, you might as well leverage a mortgage because it actually grows your wealth instead of renting. But the big thing here is like, whoa, then I have a mortgage. That's bad debt. Dave Ramsey said it's bad debt. The Bible says don't be in debt, right? And so let's clarify there a little bit, right? I think when it comes to being in debt, right? As the Bible says, you become a slave to the lender. That's usually referencing things like taking out loans for things that you don't need, aka bad debt, right? But when it comes to being responsible with debt, we have to ask ourselves, okay, am I going to make a monthly housing payment each month anyways? Yes, it's either rent or a mortgage, right? Can I afford to buy a house in cash? Probably not. Don't know who has $500,000 just laying around to buy a house in cash. And for you to save up that amount of money based on your current situation, it would take forever, right? And you will lose more money on the rent than you would on the interest that you're trying to avoid on the mortgage, right? And so even that though, if you go into an investment calculator, right, and you put in let's just say you're going to buy a house for $500,000, right? And you put $500,000 into the investment calculator over 30 years, right, which is the same duration as a mortgage, and you put the return on investment to be 10%, which is the average return on investment that the stock market has gotten over the past 25 years, I believe, right? That's going to come out to be millions of dollars, if not maybe some back of the envelope math here, but $8 to $10 million, I bet you that comes out to. Maybe a little bit less. Let's just say 5 to be safe, right? So you could take that money, right, and purchase a house with cash, right? But then, yes, you would save yourself the interest on the home or the mortgage, which if you took out a mortgage on a $500,000 home at a 6 to 7% interest rate, you'd probably pay another $500,000 on top of that in interest, which would make the total cost of the home principal, like the original 500 plus the interest, about $1 million. So if you pay the $500,000 in cash, you would probably save yourself about $500,000 in interest. Again, even if you had that money, right, you could do worse things with your money than save yourself that amount of interest. But it's not about doing the worst things with money. It's not about doing decent things with your money. It's about doing what is best with your money to grow it at the most optimal fashion. And so point being is if you took that money and put it in the stock market over the same 30-year duration as your mortgage, you're going to walk away with $5 million. You deduct the $500,000 that you paid in interest because you took out a mortgage and invested your money in the stock market instead. You still walk away with $4.5 million, which is the $5 million you made in the stock market minus the $500,000 that you paid in interest on the mortgage, $4.5 million left over. And so a lot of numbers floating around here. I hope I'm being as clear as possible with this, but simply thinking all debt is bad is silly. God doesn't hate debt. He hates a lack of responsibility. He hates poor stewardship, right? And so when we go to leverage debt, particularly good debt, we just have to ask ourselves, okay, do I need this? Can I afford this monthly payment? And what's the worst case scenario here? And then prepare for the worst case scenario, mitigate the risk. Right. And so to kind of bring this plane down for a landing, if you will, one thing you have to understand if you want to get out of debt as fast as you can, but particularly stress about it way less, is understand the difference between good debt and bad debt. Bad debt is buying things that you don't need with money that you don't have at a high interest rate with no plan on how to pay it off. Good debt is leveraging other people's money at a low cost or no cost to increase their values, their opportunities, and their wealth. Right? And I see a lot of business owners leverage good debt. They'll take out a 0% APR credit card, invest in a program and in a mentor that's going to teach them how to ramp their business up, save them stress, save them mistakes, save them costly issues, and expedite the success that they have. Right? And then they end up making hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars back because they leverage good debt to get access to that mentor, that information, that program, that opportunity, right? And so a little bit more of a drastic example, but or not as simplistic of an example, but a lot of our clients have done that before, either to start a business or to get help with their current one. They spent $30K in OPM or other people's money, good debt, hired a mentor, joined a program that taught them how to make a couple of $100,000. I think the return on investment was worth it. Right? Just to be responsible with the debt that you're leveraging. All right. And so, but after understanding, this debt philosophy, there's one tactical mistake that people make every single day that actually makes their debt grow faster instead of shrinking it. And the issue is what happens is they start mixing new debt with old debt. It's going to be almost impossible to get out of debt if you keep mixing new debt with old debt. And so I'll give you an example. What is old debt? Old debt is balances that have been carried on past credit cards, right, that are interest bearing, they're accruing interest. You haven't paid the balance down quite yet, obviously, and you just keep putting new balances on there, right? Because for one, you're barely knocking it down by paying the minimum payment because of the interest being added on. Then you keep putting more debt on that credit card, right? It's going to continually increase the balance and make it really confusing on, okay, which debt is bad here, which debt is new, which one's interest bearing, what's not. And that confusion leads to inaction, and inaction, obviously, as you can imagine, is not conducive to paying off your debt, especially in the fastest, most optimal fashion possible. And so the best thing that you can do is, if you have an interest bearing card, if you can, stop using it for the time being. Stop using it while we figure out a plan on how to pay that interest bearing debt off. And so that would be a number one way. Is there a way that we can stop using that credit card so we stop putting more debt on there, blending new debt and old debt, and making it really confusing and hard to get out of the debt in the first place, let alone in totality? Sometimes, that's not an option because you're like, well, I need that space. I don't have it on my debit card. We're in a tough time right now, right? The possibility of opening up a new credit card, right? Hear me when I say this. I'm not telling you to open up a new credit card and rack it up like the other one, but opening up a new credit card where we can use that one responsibly, which would be just put things on there that you can afford, your gas, your groceries, the things that you're already going to spend money on. And that's it. If you're running a proper budget, it should tell you what you can afford each month, right? Just putting that on there each month, paying it off immediately or by when the credit card statement is due, so you don't carry a balance and start accruing interest again, could help provide a solution for you to stop utilizing that credit card that has old interest-bearing debt on it, or if there's multiple ones. We have to do our best to figure out a system and a strategy to stop blending the old debt with the new debt so we can actually get out of that debt a heck of a lot faster, costing ourselves way less stress and way more money, right? There are some exceptions to this, or nuances, if you will, but it's going to require you to be able to read the credit card statement the right way, right? So let's just say you've got $10,000 of interest-bearing credit card debt on your Chase credit card. And we'll have to understand that, like, okay, that's interest-bearing. We need to create a strategy to pay that off. But I need $300 each month to buy my groceries, right? And so you can put the $300 on there each month and pay it off immediately. Almost use it like a debit card, or almost use it like cash. That'll assure that you're not adding on a new debt to the old debt and keeping it separate and not making it complicated to pay off. And so that is one thing. You just got to stop mixing new debt with old debt. And I know it's hard, but that's what obedience is. It's doing the right thing even when it's hard. That's why you need mentorship. That's why you're watching videos like this, right? Because a strategy is needed to be able to help make it through some of these hard situations to be able to accomplish the goals that we have, particularly when it comes to debt. And so the next step I'm about to share with you is perhaps the most disregarded step of all of them, and yet is the one that removes probably all the emotional chaos and stress from the debt payoff, right? And so I use a debt calculator, right? Just go to Google after this and type in debt repayment calculator, right? And so Bankrate has one, but I really like Credit Karma's, right? They have a great one, and you can plug your information into there to show you how you can pay off your debt in the fastest, cheapest, most stress-free and trustworthy way as possible, right? And so when you pull up the debt calculator, right, it's going to obviously ask you for what is the balance and what is the interest rate, right? And particularly the Credit Karma one. Then you get to the bottom and it's going to ask you to pick. Do you want to figure out how to pay this off by committing to a monthly payment you're comfortable with, like $500, or do you want to commit to paying this off in a particular duration, like 12 months? And once you hit the calculate button, okay, pay 10K off at 25% interest in 12 months, it'll show you what your monthly payment would have to be to accomplish that goal in that time frame. And so to give you an example here, right? Let's just, again, say you've got $10,000 in credit card debt at a 25% interest rate, and you're willing to pay $500 a month towards that. You plug that information into the Credit Karma debt repayment calculator and press calculate. It'll tell you exactly how many months it would take you to pay off that debt at $500 a month, right? And also the amount of interest that you would accrue in the process. If you're not happy with either of those outcomes, whether it's how long it would take you or the amount of interest that it would take you, you can keep upping or toggling with the number. Okay, what about 600? How many months is that cut off? Just throwing an extra 100, and how much interest, until you come to an outcome that you're comfortable with, obviously monthly payment wise, but duration that it will take you to pay off, and then also interest that you would accrue as a result. Same thing with the outcome. Sometimes people are like, I'm not really as stressed about the monthly payment as, like, I need this to be gone in 12 months, right? And you plug that in and it'll tell you what your monthly payment would need to be to pay it off in 12 months. And again, how much interest you would accrue if you paid that amount of money towards that debt over the next 12 months. Then from there, again, same thing. Can you afford that monthly payment? If not, you may have to go up in duration. Like, okay, 12 months, I can't afford the monthly payment, but what happens in 15 months? What happens in 18 months? Right? Or maybe you can afford the monthly payment. You're like, I don't like how much interest I'm going to get charged over the next 12 months. So what if I paid it off in 8 months? How much could I save? So basically what I'm saying is utilize tools that can give you objectivity, right? Which is factual information instead of subjectivity, which is usually what our emotions cause for us, right? When we don't use tools and resources and systems and strategies, it can cause us so much unnecessary stress and anxiety because we got no idea how to go about this. We've got no idea what's going on, right? And so if you have a concrete plan, you may not love the numbers, but you'll be a heck of a lot less stressed because you actually have a plan in place that you're following and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. You have a path to follow. And by the way, I'm talking a lot of numbers here. If you want some help implementing this debt payoff strategy and getting your finances right, you can click the first link in the description to book a call with one of my team members to see if the Good Steward program is the right fit for you. And so now what I'm about to tell you next completely goes against everything you've been taught about money, but it's the secret that separates the wealthy from everyone else, right? And so I have a money management philosophy that I always say, I'm not against making more money, but more money is not the solution, especially if you have poor money habits. All more money is going to do is just going to highlight those poor money habits. You're going to make more, you're going to spend more, you're going to make more, you're going to see just as little. You're going to make more, you're going to have the same exact problems that you had in the past when you had less money coming in. Because making more money, again, can help in the short term and there's a time and a place for it. But if you have poor money habits, all it's going to do is just be a Band-Aid over the real problem. So making more money or getting a promotion or investing in this stock usually isn't the solution to create long-term real financial change. It's just a short-term quick hit, right? Short-term quick fix. To how you create real long-term financial change for you and your family is becoming a better steward of your current situation, right? Because a lot of times that your current situation, there's a heck of a lot more opportunity there than you think. It's just because you're avoiding it and neglecting it is what's making it feel bad and get worse, right? And so when you step up and get some objectivity around your current situation, you find opportunities, you find peace. And it's crazy how doors then start to open. Because I always say, like, I'm not God. I'm not saying that, we should do things to be rewarded by God. But a lot of times in the Bible, it talks about, faithful stewardship is rewarded. Again, we're not going to step up and manage our money better for the sole purpose so God can bless you with more. Like, you're not fooling anybody. He knows your motives. But we need to step up and manage our money in a way that honors God, right? Because we truthfully believe it's the right thing to do. And as a result, a lot of times the byproduct is that we are blessed with more. Because I always say, like, if your teenager couldn't back the car out of the driveway, you probably wouldn't allow them to bring the car on the highway, right? That's not punishment. That's wisdom. And God's the same way, especially when it comes to finances. And so I have clients that make $300,000 a year and clients that make $70,000 a year. And the people making $70,000 a year have a larger savings, less debt, and way less stress and more opportunity, simply because the difference is how they are managing the money when it comes in, how they are stewarding their current situation to the best of their ability. And so the best financial advice I could ever give you is not to make more money, get a promotion, invest in this stock. While those things may be able to help from time to time and may be a part of the strategy from time to time, the best financial decision that you could ever make and the best financial advice I could ever give you is just, no matter where you're at right now, step up and take better care of your current situation. And I bet you your anxiety and stress drop and your opportunities start to increase. And so, but here's what most people completely mess up when it comes to this. They think that budgeting means restriction, right? When in reality, it's the key to having more freedom than you've ever had. And so, unfortunately, society has made budgeting feel like handcuffs or have given this awful stigma around it, right? Or many different stigmas around it. But when you are budgeting the right way, it massively decreases your stress and anxiety, massively increases your opportunity, right? And it allows you to live your life and spend your money, but in a calculated, controlled, and confident fashion. Budgeting shouldn't be handcuffs. It should actually be empowerment. Budgeting shouldn't make you feel like you're being punished. It should actually feel like you're getting opportunities to live your life in a calculated, controlled, and confident fashion. And so budgeting is not about restrictions. It's not about punishment. It's just about stewardship. It's about managing what you already have. Like, you can't improve what you're not measuring. And budgeting not only allows us to live our life, spend our money, and make financial progress at the same time if you're doing it the right way, right? But it also allows us to measure what's actually going on. right? How are you supposed to improve what you're not measuring? Thinking about if you had a weight loss goal, right? If you're like, I want to lose some weight. What would you do probably every day, every other day, at least once a week? You're probably going to step on the scale and do what? Measure your weight, AKA measure the metric that you're trying to improve. So if you're trying to improve the metric of money, but you're not measuring it, like, doesn't make any sense, right? And so you can't improve what you're not measuring. And so there's so many benefits, right, of budgeting the right way. And like when I say budgeting the right way, budgeting from abundance, budgeting because God calls us to be managers or stewards, right, of the money that he's blessed us with. And it's really hard to be a quality manager of money if you don't have a quality measuring system for your money, which would be budgeting, right? It allows you to actually see what's going on and make improvements from there. Decreases your stress and anxiety so much because the majority of people's stress and anxiety around money comes from not feeling in control of their money, right? Because they don't know what's going on. There's a lot of gray area. There's neglect. There's avoidance, right? And they think that they're just going to make more and everything can be okay. That's causing you and your family so much unnecessary stress and anxiety. You may not like the numbers at first, and it may take you a minute to adjust to the system, but running a quality budgeting system will drastically decrease your stress because you finally feel in control. So now you can feel at peace. It's really hard to feel at peace with something that you don't feel in control of, right? And so the beautiful part is budgeting doesn't have to be quantum physics. It shouldn't, and it should not take a ton of time. The system that we teach our clients inside the Good Steward program, once it's set up, it takes you 1 to 3 minutes a day for the rest of your life to get best results. 1 to 3 minutes a day, if that. Sometimes it takes me 30 seconds, right? Because I'm just opening up my budget, opening up my bank account, including what I made, what I spent, reading the story the numbers are telling me, and going out and acting off of that empowering information. And so I tell people all the time, it should not be quantum physics. And it should not take a long time. It should be simple, right? Finances should be simple. And so when you're budgeting every single day, you're staying on top of the numbers, right? Which is making you feel empowered, which then allows you to make empowered quality decisions. And so the next thing I'm going to share flies in the face of conventional wisdom, but it's the difference between paying off debt once versus staying debt-free forever, right? And so it's an emergency fund strategy that we teach. And so think about a savings account as an overall umbrella. You could save for just about anything, right? You can save for a house, a car, a vacation, or what we argue at JFF inside the Good Steward program to be your most important savings account, which is an emergency fund, right? An emergency fund is just a pot of money set aside in a readily accessible account to you to access when something pops up, right? When life starts to life or an emergency pops up, you're going to have that money accessible to access to help get you through the emergency instead of running the credit card bill back up, right? With no plan on how to pay it off. You tap into these funds, handle the emergency, and then build it back strategically over time. And so this will really, really help you stay. Once you get out of debt, pay off the cards, a lot of times people get back into debt because they have no savings. Something pops up, something with the kids, the car, the house, and they run the credit card bill back up and now say, I'll figure it out later. And all of a sudden 2 years passes by, $10,000 in interest, ding credit score, stress that was unnecessary. And here we are again. Right. And so my specific recommendations for an emergency fund is no less than 3 months, no more than 6 months. So anything less than 3 months, I believe, is a massive risk. Anything more than 6 months is actually a waste of money. And we want to have that money invested somewhere else working for you. Right. And so before I kind of clarify here a little bit, what I do want to say is that this isn't from a scarcity mindset. The Bible literally says not if, but when. And we have to be smart when it comes to preparing for the future. Again, not out of a scarcity standpoint, but from a strategic standpoint, right? And so I just wanted to clarify that. So 3 to 6 months of what, right? It's going to be your monthly expenses, right? People think it's your income, but it's really just your monthly expenses. And so let's just say that you want to have 3 months of emergency funds and your monthly expenses after you go through your budget are $5,000 a month. 3 months times 5,000 equals $15,000, which would be your emergency fund number for your unique situation. And so deciding on 3, 4, 5, or 6 months is just going to be based on the amount of liabilities that you have in your life and also your risk tolerance. For example, liabilities would be, how many kids do you have? How many houses do you have? Do you drive luxury vehicles? Do you travel a bunch? Are you playing sports? Or how volatile is your job, right? How volatile is your business, right? Those types of things will help you understand how conservative or aggressive you can get with the amount of months that you have in emergency funds. 6 would be conservative. 3 would be a little bit more aggressive, all right? And so using a different example here, let's just say for a little bit more conservative standpoint, you wanted to have 6 months at 120,000. if my math is right, 6 months of $20,000, right? You've got $20,000 in monthly expenses and you want to have 6 months stored away. That would be $120,000 that you would need in your emergency fund to hit your goal. If that was my situation, or really any situation, I always say just keep half in your basic checking account to act as a buffer between paychecks and bills, and put the other half in a high yield savings account, which is actually going to allow you to make a few bucks while it's sitting there. So in full transparency, me and my wife's emergency fund number is 50,000. We have 25K in our basic checking account just to act as a buffer in between paychecks and bills, right? To have a little something there. And the other 25K is sitting in a high yield savings account with Goldman Sachs, making about 4% interest while it's just sitting there for 0% risk. And so that would be my advice, right? After we get the credit card debt figured out, to build an emergency fund for multiple reasons, but particularly so we don't get back into credit card debt because an emergency pops up and we don't have the cash set aside to be able to handle it. And as a result, the credit card bills racked back up. And this final secret that I'm going to share with you as we move on is what allows my clients to not just pay off debt, but actually build wealth faster than people who never had debt in the first place, right? And that secret here is the strategic use of good debt. And so I talked about this a little bit earlier, right? But I think my own personal situation, if I could look at it, I've told people all the time, I've built my wealth, or a decent portion of it, off of leveraging good debt, right? Leveraging other people's money, OPM at no cost or low cost. And a specific strategy I used to use back in the day was with 0% APR credit cards, especially when I first started this business. And when I first started this business, we had some decent cash flow. I had money saved away, but I wanted to keep my money while also being able to leverage somebody else's money and increase my access to opportunities. And I used 0% APR credit cards, which is credit cards that are 0% interest for a certain time period, whether it's 12 months, 15 months, 18 months, 21 months. They're different from different cards, right? Which is basically that money is free for that time period, right? You have to pay it off by the end of the 12 months or whatever the promotional period is, or else the interest will kick in. But for the time being, whatever the promotional period is, it's free money, right? And so I would utilize 0% APR cards to hire mentors who help me not only set up my business the right way, but help me make a ton of money in the process. And so ended up really, really paying off. And then once the balance is paid off, your credit score actually massively benefits because you have that payment history now and also that available credit, which helps your credit utilization. And so I think a lot of business owners or entrepreneurs, right, can strategically utilize good debt to increase their wealth and increase their opportunities and their values. But I've even seen clients use 0% APR cards or good forms of debt to pay off their bad debt, right? To give you an example, if you've got a credit card that's got a 30% interest rate on it, right, and it's maxed out, that's not only crushing you in interest, but it's crushing your credit score, because consumer debt, which are what credit cards are, when they're maxed out, it's really hurting your credit score. I've seen a lot of clients take out a personal loan, which is an installment loan, not consumer debt, which is a better form of debt, which is like your student loans, your car payment, your mortgage, right? And they've, at 10% interest, they've taken the money, paid off the credit card, the balance went down to zero, the credit score spiked back up, and now they have the balance on a consumer loan, which is a personal loan, right, which is a better form of debt for the credit score, and then also way less interest in the process. And so just a couple of strategic ways here that you could either utilize good debt to pay off bad debt, or utilize good debt to increase your values, your wealth, and your opportunities. And so the last thing I'll say here, though, I'm not saying go open up a bunch of debt and utilize it and hope you make money, right? One thing that's really important is you have to have a clear plan on how you're going to utilize the funds to be a good steward of this debt, right? And so I think for one, you have to ask yourself, can you afford the monthly payment, right? For two, what are you doing with this money so it's used in a fashion where the rewards outweigh the risk? Right? Because the question isn't whether there's going to be risk. There always is, especially when it comes to finances. The question is, do the rewards outweigh the risk, right? And also, do I understand what the risks are so I can proactively create a plan to mitigate those risks? And then lastly, create a debt payoff plan, no matter if it's good debt or bad debt. Even if it's good debt, ask yourself, okay, how am I going to pay this off? When am I going to pay it off by? Where's this money coming from? And so creating a plan, okay, even though I'm leveraging good debt, what's the fastest, cheapest, stress-free, and most trustworthy way as possible to pay this off so I can make sure I'm being responsible with it, being strategic with it, while also not missing opportunities out of fear and a lack of clarity when it comes to this difference between good debt and bad debt, but specifically leveraging good debt in a very healthy way. And so we have clients do this all the time. And again, it works out very well because it was well thought out, right? It was preyed upon before, right? And ultimately they have the right support and the right plan to not only leverage the funds correctly, right? But to mitigate the risk and to pay it off in the most optimal fashion possible. And so those that I just shared with you are the secrets to paying off debt fast in 2025. And you should 100% implement these right now before you waste more time with outdated, restrictive, fearful advice that keeps you financially stuck. But here's the reality. Doing this alone is clearly easier said than done, right? You'll face analysis paralysis on which debts to prioritize first. You'll struggle with the emotional aspects of money management when life gets stressful, which is super real. And you'll miss opportunities to leverage good debt strategically because you don't have an expert guiding you through the process. And with everything I've given you, you kind of really only have two options now, right? Number one, you can try to do it yourself, knowing all the problems you'll face, and I wish you the best of luck, or work with me to help you eliminate your debt while building wealth and honoring God with your money at the same time. If you pick the second option, then click the first link in the description of this video to book a call with somebody from my team to see if the Good Steward program is the right fit for you. This is for the faith-based and ambitious who want to get their money right so they can finally achieve the financial freedom and peace they've been praying for. So if that's you, click the link, book your call, and let's get your finances aligned with God's plan for your life. Also, check out my full guide to faith-based money management, which is on the screen right now. And I just want to thank you for watching, and make sure you like and subscribe for more biblical financial wisdom and practical money strategies. And I'll see you in the next video.